Nah. My parents told me they had nothing left. They said it with straight faces, over the phone, while I was sitting in a hospital parking garage in Edmonton with my sister's hospital bracelet still in my hand. That was 3 years ago. Last week, I found out they had quietly transferred $180,000 to my brother's account the same month my sister died. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I'm not a bitter person. I have never been someone who holds grudges. My therapist will tell you that. My husband will tell you that. Even my brother, the same brother I'm about to tell you about, would have told you that, once upon a time. But there are some things that change you so completely that the person you were before just doesn't exist anymore. And finding out the truth about what my parents did was one of those things. So let me start from the beginning. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand what we lost first. My sister Claire was 31 when she was diagnosed. I was 28. We were 18 months apart, and growing up, people used to think we were twins. We had the same laugh. The same way of finishing each other's sentences. When she called me in March of 2022 and told me it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I didn't cry on the phone. I waited until we hung up, and then I sat on my bathroom floor for 20 minutes before I could stand up again. The treatment plan was aggressive. Her oncologist at the Cross Cancer Institute was optimistic. That word, optimistic, I held onto it like a rope. Chemotherapy first, then, depending on response, a stem cell transplant. The kind where they harvest her own cells beforehand, freeze them, blast her system with high-dose chemo, then reintroduce the cells. It's brutal. It works often enough that they call it standard of care, but the window for it, the timing, everything had to line up perfectly. Claire was single at the time. She'd been renting a one-bedroom apartment in Edmonton's Oliver neighborhood, working as a graphic designer, doing well enough, but not in the way that meant she had savings. She had about $4,000 in her account when she got the diagnosis. The direct treatment costs in Canada were covered, thank God. But everything adjacent to it wasn't. Parking at the hospital, $22 a day, every day. The medications they don't cover, and there are more of those than people realize. Special nutrition supplements her team recommended during chemo. The fact that she couldn't work for months and her short-term disability through her freelance insurer covered 60% of almost nothing. Within the first 2 months, she had burned through her savings. She moved into my apartment. My husband Marcus and I had a 2-bedroom place near White Ave, and we made it work. Marcus built a little curtain wall so she'd have some privacy. He drove her to appointments when I was at work. He learned which teas settled her stomach after chemo and kept them stocked without being asked. I called my parents in May. My mother and father had retired 3 years earlier to a property outside of Kelowna. They weren't wealthy in the way that people sometimes picture. No yacht, no second home in Arizona. But they owned their house outright. My dad had a good pension from 30 years with the federal government. My mother had her own RRSPs and some inheritance money from my grandmother that we all knew about because she'd mentioned it at family dinners more than once. They were comfortable. That's the word. Comfortable. I explained everything. The gap between Claire's disability payments and her actual expenses. The supplements. The parking. The fact that her immune system was so compromised she couldn't safely take public transit and sometimes needed taxis to appointments when neither Marcus nor I could drive her. I had added it up. The monthly shortfall was around $1,400. My mother listened. There was a pause. And then she said that things were tighter than we might think. That retirement wasn't as straightforward as people assumed. That they were on a fixed income now. My father got on the phone and said more or less the same thing. In his more or less the same tone, the one he used when a conversation was ending. I asked if they could help with anything at all. $50 a month. 100. My mother said she'd have to look at the budget. She never called back. I didn't push. I told myself they were scared too. That seeing their daughter sick was its own kind of pain, and maybe they were processing it by pulling away. I made excuses for them the way you do for people you love, even when something in you already knows the excuses don't quite fit. Claire got through the first round of chemo. Her response was good enough that her oncologist confirmed she was a candidate for the transplant. We cried in the car on the way home from that appointment. The good kind of crying, where you're laughing at the same time. But then something changed with her blood work around month 4. A secondary issue. Something her immune system was doing in response to the treatment. Her team put her on an additional medication, an immunosuppressant, that was only partially covered under Alberta Health. The monthly out-of-pocket cost was $340. That doesn't sound like a lot written down. But we were already running a deficit. Marcus had quietly started taking extra shifts. I had stopped buying anything that wasn't essential. We were doing everything right, and the numbers still didn't work. I called my parents again in September. I was more specific this time. I said Claire needs $340 a month for a medication that she needs to stay on the transplant track. I said, I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm asking for one specific thing. My father said they had some unexpected expenses come up. Home maintenance, something about the deck. He said it wasn't a good time. I want to tell you what it felt like to hear that, but I'm not sure I have the right words for it even now. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like a door closing somewhere deep inside me. Quiet. Final. Claire was approved for the transplant in October. She went through the harvest process, the high-dose conditioning, all of it. She was in isolation for 11 days. I sat outside the isolation unit for most of those 11 days. I brought a book and didn't read a single page of it. She came through. For about 6 weeks, she came through. For about 6 weeks, she came through. Then her body started fighting the reintroduced cells. It shouldn't have happened that way. With an autologous transplant, rejection isn't supposed to be the risk. But her immune system was unpredictable from everything it had been through. And there was a complication. An infection that her body couldn't fight. Her team moved fast. They tried everything they had. But her system was it was exhausted. There was nothing left to fight with. Claire died on December 4th, 2022. She was 31 years old. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a collection of vintage concert tees she'd been building since she was 16 and a half, finished illustration project on her laptop that I still can't bring myself to open. My parents came to Edmonton for the funeral. We were civil. I was in shock, I think, in a way that made everything feel padded and far away. My mother cried. My father shook hands with Marcus. We buried my sister on a Tuesday in the frozen ground outside the city, and then everyone went home. I went back to work 2 weeks later, because sitting still felt impossible. And then 8 months passed. And then 14. And then my brother called me on a Sunday afternoon in March of last year, and something in his voice was slightly too careful. And he said he had some news. He and his girlfriend Amber had just bought a house. A detached house in Calgary's Altadore neighborhood. Not a starter home, not a condo, an actual house with a yard. He was excited and slightly nervous, and he said our parents had helped make it possible. I said, that's nice. I said it the way you say something when you're not sure yet what you're feeling. That night, I called my mother, and I asked, very simply and very calmly, how much they had contributed to my brother's house. She said it was a private matter between them and my brother. I said, Mom, I'm asking because Claire needed $340 a month, and you told us you didn't have anything to give. There was a long silence. And then she said that the situations were different. That helping with a house was an investment, that it was a different category of thing, that Claire's medical situation had been. And I want to make sure I say this exactly right, because I have not forgotten a single word of this conversation. She said it had been uncertain. and that they'd had to make difficult decisions about where their money could do the most good. I hung up the phone. Marcus found me 20 minutes later sitting on the kitchen floor. He didn't ask questions, he just sat down next to me. I hired a notary the following week. There's no legal mechanism in Canada that forces parents to disclose their financial decisions to adult children, and I knew that. But I had a contact who did estate planning, and through some careful, patient document work, I was able to see what had been transferred and when. The number was $180,000. Transferred in 2 installments, one in October of 2022, while Claire was in isolation, one in January of 2023, 5 weeks after her funeral. October 2022 was the same month my father told me it wasn't a good time because of the deck. I sat with this information for 3 weeks before I told anyone. I told Marcus first. I watched his face go through about 6 different things in the space of a minute. He's a measured person, my husband, not someone who reacts quickly or dramatically. He just looked at me and said, "What do you need to do?" I didn't know yet. That was the honest answer. I called my best friend, who had been with us through all of it, had driven Claire to appointments, had sat with me in hospital waiting rooms, had shown up at the funeral, and stayed after everyone else left to help clean up. She cried on the phone. She said, "I don't know how you're this calm right now." I said, "I don't think I am calm. I think I'm just not sure what calm is supposed to feel like anymore." And then, 6 weeks after I found out, my mother called me on a Wednesday evening, and she was crying before I even said hello. She said my brother had been admitted to the hospital, his kidneys. He'd been managing a chronic condition for years. I knew about it vaguely, the way you know about a family member's health thing that seems handled and distant. But something had shifted. He was in acute failure. He was on dialysis. And the transplant coordinator had been in touch, and they'd done preliminary family typing, and I was a possible match for a living donor kidney transplant. I want to tell you what went through my mind in that moment, because I think it's important to be honest about it. The first thing I felt was not compassion. I want to be a good person, and I am trying to be a good person. But I'm going to tell you the truth. The first thing I felt was something cold and specific and very clear. I thought about the deck. I thought about the word uncertain. I thought about Claire in isolation for 11 days, and me sitting outside with an unread book. And then I thought about Claire herself, and what she would say to me, because she was a better person than me in ways that I am still learning to understand. I told my mother I needed time. She said there wasn't much of it. The transplant coordinator needed to know if I was willing to proceed with full compatibility testing. My brother's condition was deteriorating faster than expected. The window was not indefinite. I called Marcus. I sat with it for 4 days. I barely slept. I made lists, the way I do when I don't know what else to do. Reasons to say no. Reasons to say yes. I read everything I could find about living donor outcomes in Canada. I reached out anonymously to a living donor advocacy group and asked what the recovery looked like, what the long-term risks were, what my remaining kidneys' function would likely be. I wanted to make this decision with my eyes open. On the 5th day, I called my parents, not my mother, both of them. I made sure they were both on the call. And I said, before we talk about anything medical, I need to talk about what I found out. I told them the number. I told them the dates. I told them that in October of 2022, while Claire was in an isolation room with no immune system, while I was sitting outside that room, while my husband was working extra shifts, and I had stopped buying groceries that weren't on sale. In that exact month, they had transferred $90,000 to my brother's account. My father didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said they hadn't realized how serious things were, that they thought the medical system would cover more than it did, that they were afraid of making a commitment they couldn't keep. I said she needed $340 a month. He said he knew. I said she died. He said, I know. And then I said, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this because I want an apology. I'm telling you because I need you to understand what it costs me to make this decision. Whatever I decide about my brother's transplant, you need to understand that it is not simple. It is not forgiveness. It is not proof that everything is fine. It is me deciding what kind of person I want to be, and that is a thing I have to live with separately from anything you did or didn't do. I proceeded with the compatibility testing. I was a strong match. I donated my kidney to my brother 4 months ago. The surgery was in Edmonton. Marcus took 2 weeks off work. My friend drove 5 hours from Red Deer to be there. Recovery was harder than I expected and easier than I'd feared. I'm at about 85% now. My nephrologist says the trajectory is excellent. My brother and I have spoken 3 times since the surgery. The conversations are short. He says thank you every time. I say you're welcome every time. There is a lot underneath both of those phrases that we haven't touched yet, and I don't know if we ever will. My parents came to the hospital the day of the surgery. My mother hugged me in the pre-op area and she cried. I let her hold on. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. They sent a card to our apartment 2 weeks after I was discharged. Inside it, my mother had written that she was sorry, not a detailed sorry, not a sorry that held any accounting of what had happened, just the word, and below it, that they loved me. My father had signed his name underneath. I have the card. I haven't thrown it away. I haven't responded to it. I take it out sometimes and look at it and try to figure out what I feel, and most of the time the answer is something I don't have a name for yet. Claire would have been 34 this June. She would have had opinions about the neighborhood my brother bought into. She would have been appalled and probably would have channeled it into something drilly funny, the way she did with most things. She would have asked me, "Are you okay?" in that way she had, where the question actually meant something. And I would have said yes in the automatic way I always did, and she would have looked at me until I said something real. I don't know what I would have said. I still don't know. What I know is that I made the choice I could live with. Not the choice that felt fair. Nothing about this is fair. And I stopped pretending otherwise a long time ago. Not the choice that anyone else would necessarily make. The one that let me look at my own reflection without flinching. Whether that makes me a good person or a foolish one, I honestly couldn't tell you. Some mornings I wake up and I think I did the right thing. Some mornings I wake up and I sit with my coffee and I think about October 2022 and the deck and the $90,000. And I feel something so heavy and so specific that I have to just breathe through it until it passes. Both of those things are true at the same time. I'm learning to let them be. I've thought about this a lot over the past few months. Not obsessively. I'm past that stage, I think, but in the way you think about something that changed the shape of your life permanently, where you keep returning to it not because you're stuck, but because you're still trying to understand what it means. What happened to Claire was not fair. I want to say that plainly, without softening it. She was 31 years old. She did everything right. She showed up to every appointment, took every medication, endured every brutal round of chemo with a kind of quiet steadiness that I still can't fully account for. And she died anyway, and the people who had the means to ease even a small part of what we were carrying looked at that and decided it wasn't their problem. That's the part I keep coming back to, not the money itself. $340 a month is not a fortune. It is not a sacrifice. It is a deck repair, or a weekend away, or a number that disappears into a comfortable retirement budget without leaving a mark. The part that matters is the decision behind it. Someone looked at their daughter, sick and frightened and running out of options, and they weighed something else more heavily. That's a choice. Choices have consequences, and I don't mean that in a punishing way. I mean it in the most literal sense. What we choose builds the world we end up living in. And the people we become are the sum of those choices, accumulated quietly over years. My parents are living with that now. I can see it in my mother's face when she looks at me. The card she sent didn't have the right words in it. But I don't think she has the right words. I'm not sure the right words exist. Some things you can't undo with language. What I know is this. I didn't donate my kidney to my brother because I forgave anyone. I didn't do it because everything was resolved or explained or made right. I did it because I looked at what Claire would have wanted from me, who she knew me to be, who she believed I was capable of being. And I decided I wasn't going to let what my parents did shrink me. That's the only way I can describe it. Letting bitterness make the decision would have been a kind of shrinking. And I had already lost too much to lose myself on top of it. There's something about going through something genuinely terrible that clarifies what you actually value, not in a neat, lesson-learned way. More like, the noise falls away. And what's left is just the thing itself, the core of it. What I found at my core, when everything else was stripped back, was that I care more about who I am than about what anyone else deserves. That sounds almost selfish, and maybe it is. But it's also the only thing that held me together. I'm not the same person I was before Claire got sick. I don't think I'm supposed to be. Some losses change your coordinates permanently. You don't go back. You just learn to navigate from where you are now. Marcus understands that. My friend, who drove 5 hours to sit in a hospital waiting room for me, understands that. The people who show up, who ask the real questions and wait for real answers, they're the ones who matter. The rest of it, the family structures and the obligations and the expectations, those are just architecture. They're only as solid as the choices people make inside them. If you're carrying something like this, a betrayal from someone who is supposed to be safe, a grief that doesn't resolve cleanly, a decision that has no good answer, I want you to know that you don't have to make it mean something tidy, you don't have to wrap it up. You just have to decide in each moment who you want to be. And then be that person, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. That's the only thing I know for certain that is actually within your control. Claire knew that. She lived it every day of her illness. I'm still learning it. I think I'll be learning it for a long time.